I can't do this anymore.
What are you talking about? We have to finish this.
It's too dangerous now.
The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the quiet streets as she approached the restaurant, her hands clutching a small, worn bag. Her children had gone to bed hungry yet again, their little stomachs grumbling softly, and she could not bear to see their innocent faces filled with disappointment. Every step she took felt heavier than the last, weighed down by desperation, fear, and a deep, gnawing sense of helplessness. She had no money, no connections, and no one to turn to, but she did have her children, and they were her world. Her eyes scanned the restaurant as she stepped inside. The scent of fried food and baked goods filled the air, a cruel reminder of what her children were missing. She swallowed hard, her voice trembling as she approached the counter. "Please, I just need some food for my children," she whispered, barely louder than a sigh. Her words were simple, honest, and filled with a mother's love and desperation. But the manager, a man with a permanent scowl etched into his face, did not see the pain in her eyes. He saw an inconvenience, a nuisance, someone trying to take advantage of his business. "Food, for free, you can't just come in here asking for that," he barked, his voice sharp and accusatory. His anger filled the room like a storm cloud, and the few customers glanced away, uncomfortable and unsure of how to react. She flinched under his words, but she did not leave. She could not leave. I don't have money. My children haven't eaten all day," she pleaded, her voice cracking with emotion. She expected a sliver of understanding, a hint of mercy, but none came. Instead, the manager's face twisted into a sneer. He stepped closer, towering over her, his shadow falling across her like a dark cloud. "I said no," he shouted, and then, in a moment of pure cruelty, he shoved her back slightly, as if to physically push away her need. Tears stung her eyes, but she did not cry aloud. Her heart pounded in her chest, a frantic rhythm fueled by fear and anger. She clenched her fists, trying to summon courage, when the air outside suddenly shifted. The low, steady roar of engines grew louder, breaking through the tension like a thunderclap. She didn't know it yet, but help was on the way, unexpected, fierce, and unstoppable. The manager, unaware of the approaching storm, continued his tirade. He had no idea that the events about to unfold would turn the tables in a way he could never imagine. The mother's simple request for her children's meal was about to ignite a chain of events that would leave him shaken, humbled, and forever changed. "If you want, I can expand scene 2 in 450 words next, where the bikers arrive and the confrontation begins. Do you want me to do that?" The rumble of engines grew louder, vibrating through the street outside the restaurant. At first, it was just a background noise, an unusual sound that made the manager glance nervously toward the door. Then, as the motorcycles drew closer, it became impossible to ignore, the growl of leather-clad bikers arriving with an intensity that demanded attention. The mother, still trembling near the counter, glanced at the windows. Her heart leapt with cautious hope. She had no idea who these strangers were, but something told her that they were here for her, or at least for the injustice she was enduring. The bikers pulled up outside, their engines roaring like a chorus of thunder. The manager froze, his bravado slipping as he watched them dismount with a confidence that could not be mistaken. They were a striking group, men and women of different ages, all clad in leather jackets, their faces serious, their movements deliberate. They walked toward the entrance with a purpose that left no room for doubt. They meant business. Inside, the tension was palpable. Customers whispered nervously to one another, glancing between the manager and the approaching figures, unsure of what would happen. The mother stood behind the counter, trying to shrink into herself, wishing she could disappear. But the bikers were swift, surrounding the manager before he could react. The tallest of the group, a woman with piercing eyes and a commanding presence, spoke first. "Step away from her," she said calmly, yet her voice carried an unmistakable authority. The manager stammered, trying to maintain control, but his words faltered under the weight of the silent, unwavering stares around him. For the first time, fear replaced his anger. The tables had turned, and he realized just how powerless he truly was. This is ridiculous." She asked for food. It's nothing." He tried to argue, but his voice sounded small, almost absurd in the face of the bikers' unwavering presence. One of the bikers stepped closer, his hand resting lightly on the handle of his jacket, a subtle but clear warning. "It's not nothing when you treat someone like that," he said, his voice low, calm, and chilling. You humiliated her. You thought no one would notice. But we did. The mother watched, amazed and bewildered, as the biker's presence seemed to radiate justice into the room. The manager's face had gone pale, his usual arrogance replaced by a growing panic. He opened his mouth, perhaps to protest, perhaps to beg, but no words came out. The biker's silence was more powerful than anything he could say. In that moment, the mother felt a wave of relief wash over her. She was no longer alone. The fear that had weighed on her shoulders since she entered the restaurant began to lift, replaced by a cautious hope that, finally, her children would not go hungry today, and that justice had finally arrived in the most unexpected way. If you want, I can expand scene 3 in 450 words next, showing the resolution and the mother getting justice. Do you want me to continue? The tension in the restaurant was palpable as the manager stumbled backward, finally realizing that his authority was no longer absolute. The bikers surrounded him like a silent storm, their eyes locked on his every move, and he could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on him. The mother stood a few steps away, clutching her bag, heart pounding, unsure whether this moment would bring relief or more fear. But then, slowly, a sense of calm washed over her. These strangers had arrived when she needed help most, and for the first time that day, she dared to hope. One of the bikers, the woman with piercing eyes, stepped forward and spoke firmly but with a hint of compassion. "You can't treat people this way," she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had seen injustice too many times. The manager tried to speak, to defend himself, but his usual arrogance had dissolved completely. He swallowed hard, his face pale, realizing he was no longer in control. I just, he stammered, but the words trailed off. Without another word, one of the bikers nodded toward the kitchen staff, who immediately understood the unspoken instruction. Plates of food were quickly prepared, steaming and fragrant, enough to feed not only her children but also to ensure that no one went hungry that day. The mother's eyes filled with tears as she watched the simple act of kindness unfold. She had come for help, expecting perhaps judgment or refusal, but instead, she received compassion and justice combined. The manager, now fully aware of his humiliation, sank into a chair, unable to meet anyone's gaze. His anger had been replaced by a deep shame that would linger far longer than the roar of engines outside. The bikers, seeing that their message had been received, turned their attention to the mother. One stepped forward and handed her a small envelope, containing more than enough money for groceries and necessities for the week. "For your children," he said simply. "You don't have to struggle alone." The mother clutched the envelope, her hands shaking, and whispered a heartfelt thank you. I don't know what to say," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Thank you, for everything." The bikers smiled gently, mounted their motorcycles, and without another word, the rumble of their engines faded into the distance, leaving behind a quiet that felt heavier with relief and gratitude. In that moment, the mother realized something profound. Sometimes, help comes from the most unexpected places, and justice has a way of arriving when courage and kindness meet. She had walked into that restaurant with nothing but hope for her children, and she walked out with her faith in humanity restored. Her children would eat that night, and the memory of the bikers' arrival, their unexpected heroism, would remain with her forever. If you want, I can also create cinematic image prompts for all 3 scenes, so you could visually depict this story for YouTube or social media. Do you want me to do that?